The following is a special presentation of HBO Sports.
We've met 180 fighters. We witnessed 117 knockouts. We've covered 1,602 rounds.
You're lying to yourself because you're going to cry tomorrow. Give me that amount. That's the one I mixed. No, no, I got it. No. Almost done. Fight's over. Fight's over. Fight's over. It's always tomorrow.
We've celebrated 136 championships. And tonight, we proudly present our 200th fight. In 1973, a seed was planted in the fertile soil of Kingston, Jamaica, and 23 years later, that seed has blossomed into the premier boxing series on television today. From 4 different continents, over nearly a quarter of a century, HBO Sports has brought its viewers the biggest names and most memorable moments in the sport of boxing. Tonight, that tradition continues as World Championship Boxing celebrates a significant milestone. Tonight, live from Madison Square Garden in New York City, HBO Sports presents its 200th prize fight with a championship doubleheader featuring Tracy Harris Patterson defending his junior lightweight title against Arturo Gatti and Oscar De La Hoya making his New York City debut against former champion Jesse James Leija. Big-time boxing returns to Madison Square Garden for the first time in 2.5 years. Skeptics said it might be a tough ticket to sell. Tonight, it's a tough ticket to get as a near-sellout crowd jams into this arena to bring the sport back. Among them, some New York names. Walter Cronkite, former voice of God, now enjoying the fights with his wife, Matt Dillon, of To Die For fame. Here along with James Toney, former world super middleweight champion, among many boxing luminaries. World super middleweight champion interviewer Mike Wallace at ringside. Near former heavyweight champion Michael Moore. More on him later. More later also on filmmaker Spike Lee and his involvement in HBO's Real Sports. superstar Mel Gibson nearby at ringside, along with Rosie Perez of movie fame as well, and a couple of longtime New York figures, Emil Griffith, who's fought here more than any other man, and artist Leroy Neiman. Hello again, everybody. I'm Jim Lampley. We welcome you to this special evening of HBO's World Championship Boxing, the second of the two prize fights, our 200th on the air here, and we're very proud of that. We're proud to be a part of bringing boxing back to Madison Square Garden after a 2.5-year absence. In the first of the two fights, New York veteran Tracy Harris Patterson against a young gun with a lot of punching power, Arturo Gatti. That's at 130 pounds. Then we'll move up to 135 pounds, where one of the hottest fighters in the sport, Oscar De La Hoya, will go for his fourth high-quality victory of 1995 against former world champion Jesse James Leha. Working with me, as always, HBO boxing analyst Larry Merchant. And Larry, we have come back to Madison Square Garden. It's entirely fitting. Your thoughts?
Well, my first thought, anytime I'm back in the Garden, the greatest event I ever covered, first, last, and always, Ali Frazier won. But I've also been thinking of my first appearance at Madison Square Garden when I was 9 or 10 years old, and Uncle took me to fight night, sat back in the rafters, and what I remember most vividly is reading the newspaper the next day to find out, as the writer so delicately put it, that one of the fighters got sick and gave up his lunch between rounds. Right then and there, I vowed that I had to get closer to the ring to see what was really going on, and here I am.
Yeah, that's right. Still looking for those free lunches, huh? Well, it's a big occasion also for the other man who works with us, because just a few years back, heavyweight champion George Foreman made his professional debut here in Madison Square Garden. I guess you remember it like it was yesterday, George?
Yeah, I'm almost 3 years shy when I box again here of being 30 years, 1969. This was the house. It's still the house. Everything else imitates Madison Square Garden. It was so great that the whole world wanted to imitate it. We went to Africa. We went to the Philippines, trying to recapture what happened that night in the Garden.
And it's a great thrill to be able to recapture it again
No
tonight
doubt about it.
with a great fighter in De La Hoya to headline the card. If you're just a casual sports fan, you might be tempted to say, well, you know, there's only one Madison Square Garden. Technically, that's not correct. There have actually been 4 of them. But its identity within the sports world is certainly unique. The first Madison Square Garden opened for business in 1879, and within a few years, boxing was a staple. Nearly a century later, Garden boxing boss Harry Markson ran into the Pope in Rome and discovered just how central the sport's appeal had become.
A papal aide walked behind us with a clipboard to identify each one of these people. And when he got to me, he said, Harry Markson, Madison Square Garden, New York. And the Pope, his eyes lit up, and he went, Madison Square Garden, boxing. This is so illustrative of the meaning of Madison Square Garden.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena.
Whether in the ring, in the corner, or in the seats, all those who came through the 4 garden doors for boxing shared a special feeling. Tex Rickard's funeral was held at Madison Square Garden. Henry Armstrong won 2 world championships there. The first televised fight, Willie Pep versus Chalky Wright, was there. As were the Friday night fights for over 20 years. The fight of the week. You saw war hero Barney Ross honored there. Rocky Graziano in many of his fights. Pep versus Sadler. Joe Louis and the Bum of the Month Club. Rocky Marciano ending Lewis's career. And Sugar Ray Robinson saying goodbye. Murray Goodman was the publicity director for Madison Square Garden Boxing from 1950 to 1961.
We tried in the Garden to bring only the best fighters there, and making the Garden a place that you want to be in because you've earned it, and not because you've got the right promoter. And that's what it's all about.
One such fighter was Emil Griffith, who fought 26 times at the Garden, more than any other man. Unfortunately, the one for which he'll be remembered resulted in the death of Benny Kid Perez.
Actually, it was hard for me coming back, yes, because I wanted to retire. But I still didn't go to the gym, and I still didn't box. I didn't go to the garden or anything. I may pass by the garden, but I never go inside. I felt very bad about it and about the fight, but the garden, that's my home. That's my home. I really love the garden. Madison Square Garden did more for me than I could do for myself.
The garden was there for Cassius Clay when he was but a Golden Glove fighter, for the professional debut of Olympic gold medalist George Foreman, and for Roberto Duran to win the lightweight championship. Even in the 80s and early 90s, still the garden maintained its special aura and hosted appearances by middleweight stars Marvin Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard. But with the advent of casino boxing in 1978 and the arrival of enormous site fees paid to promoters, Las Vegas stimulated the economic demise of boxing at the house that Sullivan had built. Compounding the problem, the elimination of spawning clubs around the country and a severe decline in the sport of boxing. In July 1993, for the first time in its illustrious history, the Garden said no more, the sport that had made it a worldwide name. But now, after a 2.5-year absence, boxing returns to its mecca, with hope for a promising future, while still confronting economic problems similar to those of the recent past.
We've got to change the small matter of taxes and how the fees are taxed to the fighters, and we're working toward that. We've made some headway. We've got to have the support of local government in more than just taxes. We've got to have them joining us. And so when Governor Pataki showed up at a press conference to announce Oscar De La Hoya's fight here, that meant something. The state believes, as we do, that the Garden should be the capital of boxing.
I'm delighted now to see that they've reconsidered and they are allowing boxing back into the business again, because this Madison Square Garden is not Madison Square Garden without boxing.
The first Garden had an attraction for the masses in bare-knuckle star John L. Sullivan. The second Garden would escape financial ruin with the help of boxing, when promoter Tex Rickard and fighters like Jeff Willard, Jack Dempsey, and Benny Leonard stepped in to save the day. The third Garden would stage Bojack versus Bob Montgomery, a bout that raised almost $36 million for the war effort. And the fourth Garden had the fight of the century, Joe Frazier against Muhammad Ali. Now in 1995, boxing needs the lustrous aura of the Garden more than ever before, and though the square ring has largely given way here to the ice of the New York Rangers and the wood floor of the Knickerbockers, the work has begun toward restoring Madison Square Garden to its special place in the sport that helped to build it 4 times. The last sellout house for boxing in the Garden, 1983, Roberto Duran against Davey Moore. You see what Bo Dokes and McGirt Whitaker did at the gate in 1993. Tonight, as of an hour and a half before fight time, 16,000 tickets had been sold at the Garden, and so tonight's crowd may threaten or perhaps surpass that of Bo Dokes 3 years ago. And tail of the tape for the upcoming semi-main event, 30-year-old Tracy Harris Patterson against 23-year-old Arturo Gatti. Patterson 5 feet 5 inches tall, Gatti with a 3-inch height advantage. Patterson weighed in a quarter pound below the weight of Gatti, and they are equal in reach at 68 inches. Punch that numbers, Larry.